Welcome back to my channel, Sugar. They spent months secretly packing my life into boxes, eager to lock me away and claim the home I spent decades building. They assumed an aging mother would not dare fight back against her own flesh and blood. Then the new owners moved in. Let me tell you exactly how it all went down. My name is Loretta. I am 68 years old, and I spent 40 years working double shifts as a registered nurse, just to make sure my son Andre never went without a single thing in this world. When my beloved husband Thomas passed away 5 years ago, our 4-bedroom house in Atlanta became my absolute sanctuary. Every brick, every hardwood floorboard, and every blooming rose in my front garden held a sacred memory of the beautiful life we built together from the ground up. I paid for Andre to go to college straight out of my own pocket, so he could walk across that graduation stage completely debt-free. I sacrificed my own vacations, my own rest, and my own peace of mind, because that is simply what a dedicated mother does for her only child. But let me tell you, child, the devil works hard, but greedy relatives work even harder. Imagine walking through your own front door, coming back from Sunday service, feeling uplifted and filled with the Holy Spirit, only to find your living room looking like a cheap storage facility. I stepped inside and saw my own son, Andre, and his wife, Chloe, aggressively shoving my good china and my precious family photo albums into flimsy cardboard boxes. And right there, directing the whole chaotic circus, was Chloe's brother Todd. Todd is a fast-talking white real estate broker who always looked at my property like it was nothing but a walking dollar sign to fund his next luxury car. I dropped my purse on the console table and demanded to know what on earth they thought they were doing tearing apart my home. Chloe did not even have the common decency to look ashamed or lower her head. She just rolled her eyes, smoothed down her expensive designer blouse, and looked me dead in the face. With a sickeningly sweet and condescending voice, she told me that my mind was slipping and that they had already taken the liberty of booking me a bed at Sunset Pines. Sunset Pines is a discount state-run nursing home on the other side of town, known for smelling like bleach and pure despair. Todd stood there, smirking with a clipboard in his hand, telling me I needed to pack light because my new room was small. Andre, the boy I carried and raised, just stared at his expensive shoes and refused to look his mother in the eye, while they tried to erase my existence. They really thought this old black woman would just sit down, cry, and hand over the keys to her kingdom so they could cash in. They thought they had broken my spirit and won the ultimate jackpot. But what those 3 arrogant fools did not know was that I had already sold the very house they were standing in right out from under them. Let me take you back a bit, so you understand exactly what this house means to me. My late husband, Thomas, and I bought this property over 40 years ago. Back then, this part of Atlanta was not the trendy, expensive neighborhood you see today on those real estate television shows. It was just a quiet street with affordable homes where hard-working folks could raise their families. Thomas worked down at the postal service, and I was pulling back-to-back 12-hour shifts as a registered nurse at the downtown hospital. It was grueling physical work, but we did it with joy in our hearts. We did not have a lot of luxury, but we had a whole lot of love and an unshakable work ethic. When our son Andre was born, he became the absolute center of our universe. Thomas and I made a vow that our boy would never have to struggle the way we did. So we sacrificed. I mean the kind of bone-deep sacrifice that only a mother truly understands. I worked every major holiday for 25 years straight, just to get that time-and-a-half pay, while other families were taking summer vacations to the beach. Thomas and I were having staycations in the backyard, planting our garden and putting every extra dollar into a college fund for Andre. I wore the same winter coat for a decade, so my boy could have the best tutors and the nicest clothes for school. When Andre got accepted into a prestigious university out of state, Thomas and I did not even blink. We paid his tuition completely out of pocket. I wanted my son to walk across that graduation stage with a clean slate, ready to conquer the world without a single penny of student loan debt weighing him down. And he did just that. When Thomas passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, my world stopped spinning. This house with its creaky hardwood floors and the rose bushes, Thomas planted out front, became my only comfort. It held the echoes of my husband's laughter and the memory of all our hard work. I gave Andre everything I had, and my love for him was absolutely unconditional. I truly believed I had raised a respectful, grateful man, but a mother's unconditional love can sometimes blind her to the changes in her own child, especially when new people enter the picture. Everything started shifting when Andre brought home his new wife, Chloe. Chloe was a woman who always looked like she had just stepped out of a high-end fashion magazine, but her spirit was as cold as a winter draft. She grew up accustomed to a certain lifestyle and expected everyone around her to cater to her expensive tastes. Along with Chloe came her brother Todd. Todd is a slick, fast-talking white American real estate broker who wears suits that are entirely too tight and smiles a smile that never reaches his cold, calculating eyes. From the very first day, Todd stepped foot inside my home during their engagement dinner. He did not look at me like a future family member. He looked at my house like it was a giant walking dollar sign. Atlanta real estate had exploded, and my quiet little neighborhood was suddenly the hottest zip code in the city. Todd would pace around my living room, running his hands over my original oak banisters and tapping on my walls as if he were inspecting a piece of meat at the market. He would practically drool over the square footage, calculating his potential profit margin while eating the food I prepared. I tried to be welcoming and hospitable, because that is how my mother raised me in the church. But my spirit never sat right with either of them. It was not long before the subtle disrespect began creeping into my own home. It started with little passive-aggressive comments from Chloe whenever they came over for Sunday dinner. She would run her manicured fingers over my velvet sofa and loudly suggest that it was time to replace my outdated furniture with something modern and minimalistic. One evening, I even caught her whispering to Andre that my house smelled like old people and collard greens, right after I had spent 6 hours cooking a beautiful feast for them. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I bit my tongue to keep the peace. Then Todd decided to take his arrogance to a whole new level. Right in the middle of blessing the food at Thanksgiving, Todd casually pulled out his phone and made an unsolicited cash offer for my property. He told me I was sitting on a gold mine, and that a woman my age had absolutely no business maintaining such a large estate by herself. He actually slid a business card across my dining table and told me he could get the paperwork drawn up by Monday. I looked at Andre, expecting my son to stand up, tell his brother-in-law to show some respect and demand an apology for his mother. Instead, Andre just sat there, staring at his plate in complete silence. He let his wife and brother disrespect the woman who gave him life and sacrificed everything for his success. I kept a polite smile on my face and quietly handed Todd his card back, telling him my home was not for sale, but my maternal intuition flared up like a roaring fire. I knew right then and there that a dark storm was brewing right under my own roof. A few weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. I had gone over to Andre's house for our usual Sunday afternoon visit. Chloe had asked me to bring over my late husband Thomas' famous peach cobbler recipe the week before, and I wanted to get the recipe card back. I walked down the hall to Andre's home office, thinking it would be sitting right on his desk. The room was quiet, and the afternoon sun was shining through the blinds. I opened the top drawer of his heavy oak desk, just looking for that little index card with my husband's handwriting on it. Instead, my hand brushed against a thick, glossy folder tucked away underneath a stack of unpaid bills. I pulled it out, and my heart skipped a beat. The front cover read Sunset Pines in big, cheerful letters, but there is nothing cheerful about Sunset Pines. Everyone in Atlanta knows that place is a dilapidated state-run nursing home where they send folks who have run out of money and run out of family. It is a place that smells of cheap bleach and forgotten souls. My hands started to tremble as I flipped through the glossy pages, showing tiny shared rooms and grim recreation areas. I wondered why my son would have a brochure for a nursing home. Then a folded piece of paper slipped out from the center of the brochure and fluttered to the hardwood floor. I bent down to pick it up, and when I read the header, my blood ran entirely cold. It was an official property appraisal for my house. The logo at the top belonged to Todd's real estate firm. I scanned the numbers and saw the final estimated value printed in bold black ink: $850,000. Todd had actually appraised my home behind my back. They had a physical document calculating the exact worth of the roof over my head. I stood there in the quiet of my son's office, holding the paper that proved my daughter-in-law and her brother were actively planning to liquidate my sanctuary. My breathing grew shallow, but I forced myself to stay completely quiet. If they were hiding this appraisal inside a nursing home brochure, there had to be more. My maternal intuition was screaming at me to keep looking. I gently set the brochure down and opened the bottom drawer of the desk. I dug deeper into the shadows of that bottom drawer and found a thick manila envelope hidden beneath a stack of old tax returns. I carefully undid the metal clasp and pulled out a stack of legal documents that made my stomach physically turn. The first page was a drafted power of attorney document naming Andre and Chloe as my sole legal guardians. But it was the second document that truly shattered my heart into a million irreparable pieces. It was a drafted affidavit of mental incompetence. I read the words on the page and felt a wave of nausea wash over me. According to this fake legal document, I was suffering from severe advanced dementia. The paperwork claimed that I was leaving the gas stove on all night and endangering the neighborhood. It claimed that I wandered the streets in my nightgown, unable to remember my own address. It even stated that I no longer recognized my own son during his visits. Every single word was a meticulously crafted lie. I had been a registered nurse for 40 years. My mind was as sharp as a tack, and my health was in perfect condition. But Todd and Chloe were building a fake paper trail to present to a judge. The entire sinister plot snapped into clear focus right before my eyes. They were going to blindside me with these forged medical papers and drag me into court. They planned to have a judge declare me mentally unfit so they could legally strip away my autonomy and toss me into the cheapest facility they could find. Once I was locked away in Sunset Pines, Todd would take over the sale of my beautiful home. He would secure a massive commission for himself, while Andre and Chloe would pocket the $850,000 to fund their lavish lifestyle. They were willing to erase my freedom and lock me in a sterile room just to get their hands on my money. The absolute cruelty of it took my breath away. The son I had birthed, the son I had worked double shifts to put through college, was conspiring with strangers to throw me away like a piece of spoiled meat. I carefully folded the papers and slipped them back into the manila envelope. I placed the envelope exactly where I found it in the bottom drawer. I put the appraisal back inside the nursing home brochure and closed the desk. I smoothed down my skirt, took a deep breath, and walked back into the living room with a pleasant smile on my face. I told them I could not find the recipe and that I was going to head on home. They did not suspect a single thing. When I drove back to my empty house, I did not shed a single tear. I did not collapse onto my sofa and cry to the heavens, asking why my own flesh and blood would betray me. I had done all my crying when my husband passed away. Instead, I felt a cold, hard, righteous fury burning deep inside my chest. I realized in that moment that I was no longer a mother to Andre, to him and his greedy wife. I was just an automated teller machine waiting to be cashed out. I picked up my phone and called my late husband's old estate lawyer. I told him I needed his help immediately, and that time was of the essence. We initiated a silent but aggressive investigation into my son's life. What the lawyer uncovered through a private background check explained everything. Andre and Chloe were drowning in a sea of massive debt. They owed over $150,000 in credit card bills and personal loans. Their luxury cars were weeks away from being repossessed, and Todd was in even deeper trouble. The background check revealed that Todd was actively facing a massive lawsuit for real estate fraud and desperately needed an influx of cash to pay his legal fees. My home was their only lifeline. They were sinking and they planned to drown me to save themselves. I refused to let that happen. Working quietly with my lawyer, I immediately moved all my liquid assets and savings into an irrevocable blind trust that Andre could never touch. Then I took the ultimate step to protect my peace and my purse. My lawyer reached out to a high-end corporate development firm that had been buying up properties in my neighborhood. We listed my house privately, without putting a single sign in the front yard. The corporate buyer came through immediately and offered $900,000 in pure cash. They wanted the land for a new luxury development and were willing to close the deal in record time. I signed the paperwork transferring ownership of my beloved home. I secured my future while Andre and Chloe were busy picking out curtains for a house they thought they were about to steal. I packed my most precious belongings in secret, moving them to a secure storage unit while leaving the house looking perfectly normal. I was setting a trap and I was going to let them walk right into it with smiles on their faces. The very next evening, the storm finally broke inside my living room. I was sitting in my favorite floral armchair, sipping a warm cup of chamomile tea and enjoying the quiet hum of my ceiling fan. Without a single knock, the front door swung wide open. Andre, Chloe, and Todd marched right into my house like an invading army. They did not even bother to wipe their shoes on the welcome mat. They just fanned out and cornered me right where I sat. Todd strutted forward with that slick grin plastered across his face and violently slammed a thick stack of legal papers down onto my mahogany coffee table. The bold letters at the very top of the page read "Power of Attorney." I set my teacup down slowly, making sure my hands did not show a single ounce of fear or hesitation. Chloe stepped forward and crouched down to my eye level. She put on this sickeningly sweet and overly concerned voice that made my stomach churn with absolute disgust. She reached out and patted my knee as if I were a helpless infant. She looked at Andre and sighed heavily before turning those cold, calculating eyes back to me. She told me that they were making this difficult decision out of pure love, because my mind was clearly failing me. She had the absolute audacity to claim that she had stopped by earlier that afternoon and found the gas stove left on high with nothing cooking. She said the entire kitchen smelled like a terrible tragedy waiting to happen. It was a complete fabrication, a bald-faced lie spun out of thin air just to build her fake narrative. I had not cooked on that stove all day because I had been busy downtown, finalizing the sale of my house with my lawyers. But I let her keep talking. I let her spin that wicked web because I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They were gaslighting me right inside the sanctuary I had paid for with my own blood, sweat, and tears. Todd jumped right on cue to back up his sister's lies. He adjusted his expensive silk tie and told me that it was no longer safe for me to live independently. He said the state would take one look at my supposed memory lapses and declare me unfit in a heartbeat. He tapped his shiny gold pen against the legal documents and told me that signing over my rights to Andre and Chloe was the only way to keep the family dignity intact. He said I was one forgotten stove burner away from burning down the entire block and losing everything I owned to a massive neighborhood lawsuit. I looked at the three of them, standing there in my living room trying to strip away my entire existence. I felt a righteous fire burning deep in my chest, but I kept my face as calm as a glassy lake. I turned my gaze slowly toward my son. The boy I had carried for 9 months, The boy I had worked double shifts for just stood there staring at the baseboards. He refused to meet my eyes. His shoulders were slumped and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. I asked him directly if he actually believed the garbage his wife was spewing. Andre finally looked up, but his eyes were completely empty of the boy I once knew. He told me that my bags needed to be packed by the end of the weekend. He said the movers were already booked and scheduled to arrive first thing Monday morning to clear out the house. He pointed at the stack of papers and delivered his final ultimatum. He told me I could sign the documents right now and make the transition to Sunset Pines smooth and peaceful. Or he said they would drag me into a crowded courtroom first thing next week. He threatened to stand before a judge and testify under oath that his own mother was a danger to herself and society. He promised to let the state forcibly remove me from the property if I dared to put up a fight. To really drive their wicked point home, Todd walked back to the front door and dragged in a huge stack of flattened cardboard boxes. He dropped them right in the middle of my Persian rug with a loud, heavy thud. The dust settled around my ankles as Chloe gave me one last pitiful, condescending look. She told me to get a good night's sleep and start packing my essentials because they were not going to waste any more time arguing with a confused old woman. Without another word, the three of them turned around and walked out of my house, shutting the heavy wooden door behind them. They truly believed they had won the war. They thought they had left me completely broken, surrounded by empty cardboard boxes and a shattered heart. They thought I was going to spend the entire weekend crying and begging for their mercy. I sat there in the absolute silence of my living room, staring at the cardboard boxes scattered across my floor. I did not shed a single tear. I did not panic. I simply reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out my cell phone. The bright screen illuminated the dim room. I opened my secure banking application and refreshed the screen. Right there at the very top of my recent transactions was a bright green notification. The corporate buyer's massive wire transfer had cleared my private bank account just 2 hours earlier. $900,000 in pure liquid cash was sitting safely under my name in an account Andre did not even know existed. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face as I looked around the house that no longer belonged to me. My real bags were already packed and sitting safely in a luxury storage unit. They thought Monday morning was going to be my eviction day. They had absolutely no idea it was actually going to be the day they met their ultimate reckoning. Monday morning rolled in with a bright golden sun, casting long shadows across my front lawn. I woke up at dawn, just like I had done for 40 years, making myself a strong cup of black coffee and waiting for the show to begin. I did not have to wait long. Right at 8 o'clock, a rusted, rattling moving truck pulled up to my curb and parked illegally across my fresh grass. The doors swung open and out stepped the three people, who thought they held my future in the palms of their hands. Andre, Chloe, and Todd marched up my walkway with the confidence of conquerors. Todd was already barking orders at 2 young men he had hired off the street, pointing at my beautiful bay windows, and loudly declaring that the carpets needed to be ripped out by noon so they could stage the living room for a quick sale. Chloe marched right up the steps, carrying a cheap plastic laundry bag. She tossed it onto the porch swing and put her hands on her hips, looking at me with that same fake pity she had perfected over the weekend. She told me the transport van for Sunset Pines was going to be here any minute, and that I needed to grab my coat so they could get this over with quickly. Andre stood slightly behind her holding a clipboard, with those forged medical papers ready to play the role of the grieving but responsible son. He actually had the nerve to tell me that it was a beautiful day for a new beginning, and that I was going to love the pudding they served at the facility. They walked past me and opened my front door, expecting to find my house packed up in those cardboard boxes they had forced on me. Instead, they found the entire first floor completely empty. I had spent the weekend quietly moving my cherished antiques. my family photos and my personal belongings into a secure storage unit, while they were busy celebrating their premature victory. The house was bare, stripped down to the original hardwood floors. Todd stopped dead in his tracks and demanded to know where the dining table was, because he needed it to make the space look appealing for his potential buyers. Chloe started hyperventilating, asking me what I had done with the good china and the silver. Andre dropped his clipboard and started pacing around the empty living room, asking me if my dementia had caused me to throw all our family heirlooms into the trash. I simply smoothed down the skirt of my favorite floral dress, sat back down in my sturdy rocking chair, and picked up my glass of sweet tea. I told them to relax because the new owners preferred a blank canvas for their renovations. Todd spun around so fast he nearly tripped over his own expensive leather shoes. His face turned a bright shade of red as he demanded to know exactly what I was talking about. He aggressively tapped his fingers against the doorframe and shouted that he was the only authorized listing agent for this property, and that I was in no mental condition to be making delusional jokes about new owners. Chloe started screaming at Andre, telling him to call the facility right now because my sickness was clearly making me hallucinate. Andre finally looked at me with genuine panic in his eyes, begging me to stop making things so difficult and just get in the van before he had to physically force me. But before anyone could pull out a phone, a sleek black town car turned the corner and glided smoothly up to my driveway. Right behind it was a marked Atlanta police cruiser, with its lights flashing just enough to catch everyone's attention. The heavy silence that fell over my front porch was absolutely delicious. They all stood completely frozen, watching as the car doors opened. Out stepped Mr. Sterling, my late husband's sharp-as-a-tack estate lawyer, carrying a thick leather briefcase. Right beside him were two sharp-dressed representatives from the corporate development firm that had purchased my land. And walking up the driveway with their hands resting casually on their duty belts were two uniformed police officers. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sweet tea, letting the ice cubes clink softly against the glass. Todd started sweating instantly. He tried to puff out his chest and marched down the steps, introducing himself as the property manager and demanding to know why law enforcement was interrupting a private family medical transition. Mr. Sterling did not even shake his hand. He simply walked right past. Todd climbed the steps to my porch and stood firmly by my side. He looked down at the three of them and announced in a booming, authoritative voice that there was no family transition happening today. He stated clearly for the official record that this property was now legally owned by Vanguard Development Corporation, and that the closing had been finalized, executed, and fully funded earlier that morning. Chloe let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching Andre's arm, as if her legs had suddenly given out from underneath her. Andre stammered uncontrollably, asking the lawyer what he meant by corporate development. He yelled that they had a medical power of attorney and that I was totally unfit to sign away a house. One of the police officers stepped forward and informed Andre that they were present to oversee the final handover of the property to the corporate representatives and to ensure that no unauthorized individuals were trespassing on the premises. Todd began shouting that the sale was illegal, that he was the broker of record, and that the entire transaction was completely fraudulent. But Mr. Sterling calmly unclasped his briefcase and pulled out a stack of certified legal documents that shut Todd up faster than a sudden summer power outage. Mr. Sterling held up the flawless bill of health I had received from an independent state-certified neurologist just 3 days prior, proving my mind was perfectly sharp. He looked Todd directly in the eyes and informed him that any attempt to challenge a corporate sale with falsified medical documents would result in immediate federal fraud charges. The absolute silence that followed was music to my ears. I stood up from my rocking chair, setting my sweet tea down on the porch railing. I walked down the steps, looked my son dead in the eyes, and dropped the ultimate hammer. I told him I sold the house for $900,000 in pure cash to a firm that plans to bulldoze it to the ground and build luxury townhomes. The color drained completely from Andre's face, leaving him looking like a ghost in the morning light. Mr. Sterling handed Todd a formal cease and desist order, permanently banning him from operating within 30 miles of any property attached to my name. He then informed Todd that his fraudulent appraisal was currently being forwarded to the State Real Estate Commission for a full criminal review. I turned to Chloe and watched her perfect, arrogant facade crumble into a million tiny pieces. I let them know I had done my own thorough research. I announced right there in front of the police and the corporate suits that I knew all about their crushing $150,000 credit card debt. I told them I knew their luxury cars were about to be repossessed by the bank and that Todd was drowning in a massive real estate fraud lawsuit. I pulled a copy of their fake medical affidavit out of my apron pocket and dropped it right at Andre's feet. I told him I knew they had forged a doctor's signature to lock his own mother in a state-run asylum, just to pay off a pile of fancy clothes and bad loans. The absolute horror and shame radiating from their faces was worth every single tear I ever cried for them. The police officers stepped up and instructed the three of them to vacate the corporate property immediately or face trespassing charges and spend the night in the county jail. Andre reached out a shaking hand, calling me Mum and begging for a chance to explain his side of the story. I looked at the boy I gave my entire life to and told him he stopped being my son the minute he printed that nursing home brochure. I turned around and walked to the waiting town car, leaving them standing on the curb with an empty moving truck, their crushing debt, and absolutely nowhere left to go. Justice moved swiftly, and it moved with a heavy hand. Once the State Real Estate Commission got a hold of that fraudulent appraisal and the forged medical documents, Todd's slick career completely evaporated. They stripped him of his real estate license and hit him with fines so massive he will be paying them off for the rest of his natural life. He tried to fast-talk his way out of it, but paper trails do not lie, and neither do angry judges. As for Andre and Chloe, their luxurious facade crumbled entirely. Without my home to magically bail them out, their creditors swarmed them like hungry vultures. Their expensive cars were repossessed right out of their driveway, and they were formally evicted from their high-rise apartment just 2 weeks later. I heard through the grapevine that my son and his wife are now crammed into a tiny run-down one-bedroom apartment on the worst side of town, struggling every single month to make minimum payments on a mountain of debt they can never climb out of. They wanted to put me in a cramped, dark room, but they ended up building that prison for themselves. I, on the other hand, took my $900,000 and left Atlanta behind forever. I moved down to the beautiful sun-drenched coast of South Carolina and bought myself a truly gorgeous oceanfront condominium. Now, every morning, I wake up to the sound of crashing waves and drink my sweet tea on a balcony overlooking the water. I have joined a local gardening club and surrounded myself with vibrant, wonderful friends who love me for my spirit and not for my bank account. I am living my absolute best life, and I have never felt more free or more at peace. Listen to me closely, ladies, because I need you to hear this loud and clear. Never let anyone, and I mean absolutely no one, not even the very children you birthed and raised, make you feel like your expiration date has come. Do not let their greed convince you that you are helpless or obsolete. You are the architect of your own life, and it is your duty to protect your peace and your own purse at all costs. Sometimes the hardest lesson we have to learn is that family is just a word until people prove they deserve the title. If my story resonated with you today, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and become part of our wonderful community. Tell me down in the comments exactly where you are watching from and what time it is over there right now. I truly read every single message, and I love seeing how far these truths travel. For more inspiration, you can always reference the file link Kautrian Goi Meda Din 5, DocX, because sharing our experiences makes us all stronger. Stay blessed, stay sharp, and I will gladly see you in the next one.